Tere õhtust. Good evening to everyone. I didn't realize we had so many stamp enthusiasts. So I'm very glad to see so many people here tonight. And what I think will be a very good show. So let's see if we can get a signal here. And we'll start tonight's show. My good friend, my very good friend, Tiit Telmet, graduated from the University of Western Michigan way back in, he graduated from the University of Western Michigan. He then had numerous jobs throughout the United States, and in 1971, he came to Toronto. Because he, if you ask him, he'll tell you it was because of the good life, but I think it was his future bride. Anyway, Tiit came here, and over his long and illustrious career, I thought I would just read maybe a few of the societies that he belongs to. He is a fellow of the Society of Graphic Designers of Canada. They don't give that out to everyone. 1966. Oh, sorry, I wasn't supposed to mention any dates. He received the International Conference of Graphic Design Associates Excellence Award in recognition of consistent outstanding achievement in practice, education, promotion of graphic design. In 1988, he was inducted into the Alliance Graphique Internationale, which is comprised of 300 individuals from 27 countries. AGI recognizes individuals who have achieved high professional repute in the field of graphic design. He is one of 8 Canadians so honored. Those are sort of the formal, a little bit of formal background on Tiit. But I have known Tiit for a very long time. He's a very close friend of mine. And our favorite thing to do together is we like to go out and drink beer and eat oysters. So if you ever see Tiit, it's always a natural icebreaker, take him to eat oysters. Now, Tiit is a kind of he's a modest person, so I thought I would graphically, very quickly, I don't want to steal too much from his presentation, but some of his important accomplishments in the line of postage stamp design. So, he designed his first stamps in 1988. It was a set of 2 for the Conserve Wildlife and Habitat. These were his first 2, and he'll talk to us more about that shortly. He then his second set of stamps in 1989. It was a series of 4. And then he did his famous transportation series. And the interesting thing about these stamps, these were the first stamps designed on computer software for Canada Post. Started in 1993, and he designed a whole series of famous vehicles that were manufactured in Canada. This is my favorite one. The Labatt beer truck, which is, you can see it. You can see it at special shows. And what's amazing about this beer truck, if you go inside, the woodworking detail inside this truck is amazing, because in those days, they used to carry beer bottles around in wooden cases. And they're all specially fit into this back of the beer truck. So if you're ever at a show and you see this, it's well worth the visit. This is probably my favorite stamp. One of Oscar Peterson, which he designed in 2005. And then his most recent ones in 2009 were these two stamps preserving polar regions. Now, what's the amazing thing about Tiit Telmet's work? So it spanned starting in 1988. Altogether, he has designed 93 stamps for Canada Post, which I think is no trivial matter, because especially for Canada, postage stamps, they are of a very high quality in terms of their graphic design. And I think anyone who is good enough to be designing stamps deserves very high praise indeed. So, please let's give a warm welcome to my good friend, Tiit Telmet.
Thank you, Jan. Gee, I don't have to say much, you said it all. What I'm going to do this evening is, actually there's two parts to this presentation. The first one is me, and the second part is two short 5-6 minute video clips that Canada Post made in 1996 regarding the design and the print production of the vehicle series, which was a very long, big, arduous series on transportation. And that'll give you they're very short, so you have to be patient, and it'll give you a good insight to what transpires in the design stages and also in the print production stages of stamps. I'm happy to see that there's so many of you lick and stick enthusiasts here this evening, so thank you for coming. Some of you will remember back a couple of presentations ago that parents don't always understand or know what their children do for a living. I fall into that category as well. When my mother was alive, she couldn't understand how anybody could make a living dealing with images, colors, words, and make a career out of it. She thought you had to make something, like widgets. I love what I do. Design has never been a job for me, or I've never seen it as work. Design for me is a way of life. And my design philosophy has always been less is more. Keep it simple. Oh, how did that move? Cutting it off. Well, you're going to have to bear with me, just cutting off half the presentation here.
Maximize the main window. Sorry? Maximize the main window. It's playing inside a window.
Does anybody know how to do that? See, my mother wasn't the only one that knew what I do for a living. We need lots of techie help.
You want to do that? Usually there's 3 little buttons at the top right-hand side.
Try
There's a
the
minus sign,
yellow
a
button.
box.
Why don't you comment?
Well, I don't know how to operate alien hardware.
I can give it a shot.
Yeah, but it's running inside a window. You need to maximize the window that the presentation is running in.
Another thing my mother said, patience is a virtue. I tell my daughters that all the time.
Probably this.
Full screen is in the middle. Like that.
Is that a woman's touch?
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what graphic design is all about. Passion, magic, and science. Isn't that what graphic design is all about? That's a lovely quote by Bruce Carter from the mid-1990s. Throughout my career, I've been very fortunate to have worked with wonderful, talented, and dedicated individuals because design is a team effort. In fact, I was hoping one of my former associates was going to be here this evening, but maybe he'll show up later. His name is Joe Gold, actually, and he and I have worked together for many years on many projects, including many of the stamp projects that I'm going to show you this evening. I've never had a large staff. In previous years, I think 3 or 4 in the earlier years, and in the last several years, I've basically worked for myself. Stamps aren't the only thing that we're involved with design-wise. We provide design services, in all areas of visual communication for large and small organizations, including corporate identity and brand design, and that would include logos, symbols, word marks, and all their applications to corporate materials and anything that a company needs that needs their brand applied to. Print communications would be anything from annual report design, magazines, marketing materials, corporate financial materials, brochures, etc. Package design. Struan Wineries in Niagara on the Lake has been a client of ours for many, many years, and we redesigned their logo years ago and have done all their label design for their wine products over the years. And just recently, last year, we did 2 packages and labels for 2 new ice wine products that they're marketing in China. Signage and wayfinding graphics, that's predominantly what I've been doing for the last several years. And last year we completed the instructional center at U of T Scarborough campus. And it's a building designed by Diamond and Schmidt, and we did all of the interior wayfinding graphics and the signage so that people can find their way to the washrooms. Sorry?
Is the microphone on?
Okay. Can you hear me? We're not getting video. Can you hear? Okay. Whoops. We'll get there. So about Canada Post. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we ought to. Philatelic heritage. The philatelic collections contain various types of documents, including stamps and their associated records. They include everything related to stamps from their initial design to the final product. The collections include not only some of the Canadian stamps' most prized philatelists, but also the production materials used. As well, the National Archives of Canada contains unselected artwork and unissued stamps which are largely unknown to the general public. In other words, they hoard everything. Original illustrations, artwork, signed press sheets, anything that goes into the design and the production of a particular stamp issue. The National Philatelic Center is located in Ottawa and keeps each stamp issue for approximately 2 years, after which they're destroyed. Now, if you go to your local postal outlets, you can pick up a details magazine which is issued quarterly by Canada Post, and it provides specific information on upcoming stamp issues. Details about the designer, the printer, the size, quantities printed, denominations, the paper type, all the specific information that philatelists and collectors need to know about. And these magazines are free at most of the postal outlets. The Stamp Advisory Committee. The committee was established in 1969, studies proposed themes and designs, and submits recommendations to the board that manages Canada Post's annual stamp program. The committee's recommendations must meet a series of objectives and criteria. They are they primarily related to Canada and the national interest and significance? Evoke Canadian history, traditions, accomplishments, or natural heritage? Illustrate the social, cultural, political, and economic life of Canada? Commemorate the birth, the work, or an event in the life of a deceased person as having made outstanding contributions to Canada? Foster a spirit of national and international goodwill and understanding. The committee is comprised of 12 members from various professions: scientists, collectors, historians, curators, and they meet 3 times a year to review stamp programs, concepts, and they also select the winning design. Canada Post also has objectives in issuing stamps: to instill pride in their country, in the minds and hearts of all Canadians. Are they of interest and have popular appeal to broad segments of Canadian population? Encourage Canadians of all ages to buy and collect stamps. And I think, as a youngster, stamps are a wonderful learning tool. Now we have the internet and so on and so forth, but I think for kids, you get lots of history, you get lots of pictures, you get lots of color, you learn about countries, and I think it's marvelous to see a few young people in the crowd. Enhance the regard in which Canadian stamps are held in Canadian and international philatelic circles. We're getting the cutoff here. Stamp design process and production. The issue of a new stamp represents the final stage in a long process extending over several years. Typically, 2 to 3 designers are selected to develop concepts based on an outlined program, theme, and brief. Only designers accredited by a professional organization are selected. Their understanding of the stamp design process, technical knowledge, design reputations, and the maturity of their work is essential. Each designer is paid a standard concept fee, approximately $3,000 plus expenses. Additional fees are allocated for the winning design for production work phases, which deal with design, detail refinements, and various technical issues for the preparation and implementation of artwork or electronic files for pre-press production. The approved final artwork is next sent to the awarded printer, who will initiate the print production. In Canada, steel engraving was used almost exclusively until 1970. And steel engraving is what you get on your money. Lithography is now the most widely used process. This is done today with a very fine print resolution process. It's called stochastic or random micro-fine dot printing. Very, very, very fine detail is evident in the stamps that are produced today by Canada Post. Okay, some stamp facts and details. The most difficult aspect of creating a miniaturized thumb-sized concept is to keep it simple. Too much visual information at small sizes will clutter the impact for the viewer. Concepts are developed at about 3 or 4 times size, currently at 3 times size. Before computers, final concepts were photographed and submitted as 35mm slides to simulate the actual stamp size. So when you looked at a 35mm slide, it simulated the actual stamp size. Today, all concepts are submitted as digital JPEG files for committee's review. Canada Post produces about 48 to 50 stamps each year, and about 2/3 of those are self-adhesive, and 1/3 are the water-throwing stamps. Now, philatelists, they don't like the sticker stamps because they don't work very well in their collection process, versus used and so on. Canada's sticker stamps are water soluble, whereas the U.S. stamps, and they only produce sticker stamps, the paper is much thinner and they're not very water soluble at all. So collectors hate them. There are 2 security printers used by Canada Post for production printing. Both are located in Ottawa, and one has recently added a plant in Calgary. Now what's interesting or wonderful about going to a press check for stamps is that as you're watching your stamps coming off the press here, behind you, you're seeing $20 sheets of $20 bills being printed. You keep looking over your shoulder, wondering, can I get a sample? Canada Post commissions research consultants to provide extensive background information for each stamp program. Before the internet, designers also did their own additional research, and a lot of time was spent in libraries to find photographic and reference materials. With today's internet access, this research is much, much easier. You'll notice that most stamps have a 2mm white border around the edge of each stamp. And this is used for invisible tagging for automated reading equipment at sorting stations. This tagging is used on all 4 sides of a stamp and is only visible under blue light. Color bars, dots, small icons are used on all stamp sheets, usually in the salvage area. The salvage area is that little bit of that white area that's around the entire sheet, and that area contains all the credits, names of the designers, the printers, specifies the colors that are used, the barcodes for retail, etc. And also the type of paper that's used. Now, designers are also involved in the design of the cancellation line, the official first day covers, which are the philatelists, the envelopes that the philatelists collect with the stamps on them. And they usually have the stamp of the first day of issue on them. And if there's sticker stamps, then the designers are also involved in designing the little booklets that hold the sticker stamps. I wish we could see the entire screen here, but I don't know why it's cutting it off, so that's unfortunate. Okay, you lick them and you stick them. But how often do you stop to notice how postage stamps are created? An extraordinary record of Canadian experience. To create a utilitarian thumb-sized area on gum paper that excites, involves, inspires, and interests the viewer and the philatelist. A challenging task that incorporates expert teamwork at all levels. From concept design, film, and pre-press proofing to meticulous printing and quality control. Dedicated teamwork strives for production quality, consistency, and perfection of everything. We've been honored to have created many commemorative stamp programs over a 25-year period relationship with Canada Post. Okay, time for pictures. Now, I don't know. Want a date? I call this the Moose and the Goose stamp. This was issued on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of Greyall's birth and the 50th anniversary of Ducks Unlimited Canada. And this stamp issue draws attention to the need to preserve our environment through measures aimed at conservation of both wildlife and habitat. The somber graphic style used conveys a sense of threat faced by the environment and gives urgency to the message on the stamps to conserve both wildlife and habitat. Regiments. 2 Canadian infantry regiments celebrating their 75th anniversaries. The backgrounds are lithographed and the soldiers are engraved on the stamps. This presented production problems due to the vast amount of ink coverage on the backgrounds, which ultimately stretched the printed sheet. The steel engraving didn't fit. The steel doesn't expand, and it wouldn't register to the printed surface underneath. Canada Post rejected a vast percentage of the print run. Portions of the stamps, only a few little small portions of the stamps made it to retail, and they become very expensive. In fact, I was approached by a collector who came looking for autographs for this, and I said, autographs for what? Canada Post didn't release any philatelic stamps of this issue. Oh, a few got out. So he, through a friend, was able to get me a set of first day covers with corner blocks on them. It cost me $350. They got out by mistake 2 places, in Saskatchewan and in Newfoundland, because the people that dealt with this were on holiday. They didn't get the message, and once Canada Post found out, you got out. So if you can find them, they're very expensive. Now, also you can see here, in older stamps, we had to do a lot of intensive illustration, drawing. All of the assembly of layouts was done with overlays, with letraset, with rubber cement and X-Acto knives. And it was a very tedious and time-consuming, laborious endeavor. I mean, I think we're being bombarded here with help. Okay, the next stamp I'm going to show you, hopefully, is the arrival of the Ukrainians. We should stay at the bar. There we go. Okay. The centennial of the beginning of the Ukrainian mass migration to Canada is the subject of 4 stamps issued in '91. The stamp design depicts the art of noted Ukrainian-Canadian painter William Curley. The 6 panels of the mural, The Ukrainian Pioneer, depict the many hardships which faced all immigrants before and after their arrival to Canada during the pioneer era. These are huge paintings that are in Ottawa at the National Gallery, and we couldn't show the entire painting on a thumb-size format, so we picked a very small portion of the image from each painting to depict on the stamp. And each stamp has always a wonderful human interest side to them. This particular stamp, we were in the process of designing it, and my office was right across the street from Ronan's on Queen Street. Many of you know those. On the corner was a small stationery store called Tartu, and it was owned and run by 2 Ukrainian brother and sister, and had a little post office. So I'd be in there buying stationery items and so on. So one day I was in there leafing through their ethnic books, basically their costume books, looking at colors. I mean, I knew Ukrainian because like Easter time I'd see their Easter eggs painted in the window, and red and black was a very strong, dominant Ukrainian color. And what I wanted to do to make this stamp more ethnic in its characteristics, rather than just the Curley's paintings, which most people would know anyway, I wanted to give it that flavor of the bird. So I'm in there one day, and I noticed they've got shirts and blouses. They've got shirts and blouses hanging in the store, and I noticed that they've all got really wonderful embroidery on the sleeves, on the lapels, and on the collars. So I asked the lady in the store, who's the best in Toronto that does this kind of needlepoint or embroidery? And she said, that's me. And so I said, wonderful. So I had picked a book out of her library that shows a lot of the ethnic costumes and so on. I said, I want to do this pattern, but I want to do it in reds and blacks. She says, wonderful. I told her what we were doing, and she wanted, I said, we're going to pay you to do this. And she says, no, I'll gladly do it for nothing. I said, no, this is a professional endeavor. Canada Post will reimburse you for whatever expenses. She was just delighted. So she takes me behind the counter and says, what red do you want? I said, red. You know, she opens this drawer up. There must have been 100 spools of red thread in this drawer. Well, I ended up picking 3 of them. So she did me 3 strips. You can see one of them on the side there, which has the red in it. We photographed it and added it to the stamp on the side. which gives it that really ethnic Ukrainian feeling. Well, every stamp that's released by Canada Post is publicized throughout the philatelic community and also in newspapers and so on. When the Ukrainian press found out, and her name was mentioned in all of this material, they flocked to Toronto. This woman was in seventh heaven. She was on all the front pages of the Ukrainian newspapers in Toronto and Winnipeg and across Canada. And for me, that was the most enjoyable part of this stamp program, is to enable somebody down the street to share and have 15 minutes of fame. Basketball. Now, when sports enthusiasts in the world think of Canada, they automatically think of ice hockey, right? Wrong. They should be thinking of the indoor game of basketball, invented by a young Canadian, James Naismith, in 1891 while teaching at Springfield, Massachusetts. To commemorate this sporting achievement, Canada Post issued a 40-cent stamp and companion souvenir sheet with 3 stamps to mark the 100th anniversary of the game's invention. Now, you can see in the bottom right are some original concept studies and layouts which we presented to Canada Post. And on the left, you see the illustrations that we had to do in black and shades of gray because we were adding a mezzotint screen to them, which then appeared on the final stamps and they were in color. But these are the processes that you have to go through, especially in the older days when a lot of handwork and illustration needed to be done for stamps. Historic land vehicles. And there's a poster up there which displays all 25 of the vehicles, and there's also a press sheet frame in the wall in the front. This series was a 4-year series that Canada Post commissioned us to do. There were 6 stamps a year over a period of 4 years. And they were all illustrated by Cameron Wykes, who I had hired he was an extremely talented technical illustrator. The series was the first to be totally drawn and illustrated on the computer. All of the line, tonal, and full color drawings were produced in all this freehand, which doesn't exist anymore. The typography and image assembly was done in Corp Express. And the interesting thing about establishing the technology or the software to use to do these stamps, Altus Freehand was the only software that existed at the time that you could draw in preview mode, meaning you could add color to shapes, you could tint the shapes, you could vignette the shapes, the color in the shapes, and you could see it. Adobe Illustrator didn't have those capabilities in those days. So basically, I had to research the software that would enable us to do what we needed to do. And this program really was very extensive because the stamps were only produced as souvenir sheets. 6 stamps on a souvenir sheet for 4 years. Now, doing them in the computer allowed for extremely detailed information to be incorporated in multiple changes and detailed adjustments. Canada Post is paranoid and very thorough in accuracy. If something is out of whack, somebody's going to spot it and you're going to hear about it. You remember the Ullawan stamp, the pipe smoker and so on and so forth. The flack they got. But that was all well researched and justified. Canada Post is extremely good at finding people that can authenticate details and deal with the amount of, oops. You can see what we provide line drawings, and then they send back lots of notes, move this, change that. And with the computer, you could make these changes. If you did this as a painting or artwork, you couldn't do these changes. You have to start all over and rework and rework. So technology really allowed you to detail the information to its minusculous portions. That final drawing in the bottom has 4,300 shapes and pieces drawn in. And when you enlarge that, or you look at it with a magnifying glass, you can read the inscription that we drew into the plates on the side of that. And the same thing here. The most difficult part of this project was that we thought, okay, you know, Massey Harris, Massey Ferguson, General Motors, we can go to the manufacturer and get all kinds of drawings and photographs and all their engineering specs and so on and so forth. Nothing existed. It blew my mind that these companies keep nothing. So basically, for this particular thing, we had to go to the Farm Museum in Milton or wherever it was, photograph each component of this particular combine, scan them, use it as a template, and redraw it. So the drawing is what you see at the top. And then these drawings were sent to specialists that dealt with the accuracy of detail. This program was very extensive because not only did we do stamps, but we did telephone cards, mugs, T-shirts. This was a official limited edition set of 25 cards, postcards. So because this was tied in with CAPEX 96, CAPEX is a World Philatelic Exhibition which was held in Toronto in 96. And usually they're themed. So the theme for this particular exhibition was transportation. And CAPEX is it's like the Olympics of philately every 4 years. And then people from all over the world get together, talk about stamps and so on. So this was very, very significant for Toronto to be hosting this, and that was the reason that this program was so extensive. Bridges. 4 stamps issued in '95 commemorating the World Road Congress held in Montreal. The stamps depict bridges in a variety of designs built in various parts of Canada during different time periods. And because one of the stamps, the upper right one, is the 401, 403, 410 interchange bridge in Mississauga. And Canada Post always does a launch, and you even get to do a little photo op with a much younger Hazel Italian. Airports. These were also drawn in freehand, and the illustrator for these was Gary Lay. He was just an aircraft. He loved drawing aircraft. The researchers deserve a lot of credit when it comes to this step. Authentically, they were able to help us achieve is outstanding. Each of these aircraft drawings represents about 30 to 40 hours of computer drawing time, largely because we went through so many revisions and attempts to be accurate. The exhaustive research, impeccable detail, and fine artistry that have gone into the production of this special series ensures that it will be a favorite with philatelists and aircraft enthusiasts alike. This was interesting because Canada Post wanted us to do 4 stamps. Usually that's what happens. A sheet of stamps holds 16. 4 in each corner. Well, I thought that's pretty boring to repeat the 4 in all 4 quadrants. So I said, there's so many beautiful aircraft out there that why don't we do the entire sheet with different airplanes? Oh, wonderful idea. And I purposely placed the rondos, those are the round markings that the aircraft Canadian Air Force has used throughout their historic periods, they're all symmetrical. So if they're placed on the perforations, it doesn't matter whether you tear the stamp into singles, you still see half of the roundel and your eye will complete the other half because they're symmetrical. You can see it there, even though it's cut by the perforation, it still reads. The Canadian International Air Show. Now these came out at the same time. This was a 4-stamp souvenir sheet. There's a common background on all of the stamps in the set, which bleed into the salvage for the area around, giving the sheet a more pleasing overall appearance. And since this was a 4-stamp souvenir sheet, it was important for each stamp area to display an aeronautic display of the air show. So if you separated each of those 4 stamp areas, broke them out into themselves, you still had to convey the aspect of an air show. So it's very difficult to incorporate so many different kinds of imagery in there and still have each stamp read as a stamp onto itself. War Museum. Remembrance is the reason Canada's War Museum exists. The stamp was issued in time for the War Museum's official reopening on May 8th of that year, a date that marks the 60th anniversary of the Second World War victory in Europe. We experience war as a society, but we remember it profoundly in individual ways. The human aspect was key in the design. We felt it was important to find symbols that would let viewers put themselves into the image. And if you look at the bottom, you can see the white silhouette of a father and son, and that is an invitation for you to place yourself into that silhouette. It's very symbolic. The candle is hope. It allows the viewers to put themselves into the image, and because visitors to the museum respond to its call for remembrance in very special ways. The central image of the stamp is the memorial cross, best known as the Silver Cross, and that is awarded to wives and mothers of fallen servicemen. This puts the focus on survivors. It's a reminder that war affects everyone, certainly the soldiers, who were mostly men, but also their families and the women they left behind. Oh, one other thing I want to mention about the War Museum. Okay. If you look at the stamp, there's a fin in the roof of the museum. You can see it. You can see it here. I think that's. And the fin that we created for the cancellation mark, that fin in the roof is made up of Morse code, and there are windows in that fin. And both English and French, and Morse code, it reads, lest we forget. So when the sun hits the side of that thin roof, and the light shines through those windows, it leaves on the inside opposite wall, it leaves a Morse code reading, lest we forget, in both languages. So that was a very beautiful aspect of this museum, and we conveyed that same feeling in the cancellation mark. Oscar Peterson. Actually, this is my favorite stamp, the one I'm most proud of. The photographer for this was Gilles Duclos. He was a street photographer actually from Montreal. And in 2005, Canada Post commemorated the life and achievements of the internationally renowned Canadian jazz pianist, composer Oscar Peterson with a single domestic rate stamp. And the date of issue also marked Peterson's 80th birthday. One of Oscar's teachers was Paul Demarchi, a Hungarian who had been a student of Franz Liszt and an accomplished classical pianist, taught the young Oscar Peterson technique and speedy fingers. This trait was portrayed in the stamp by the overlapping photo images and the blurred movement of his fingers over the keyboard. Now, during Oscar's professional career, he played on only 2 pianos. One was the Bosendorfer, and the other one was the Estonian piano, which was Estonian. This stamp was very interesting because usually the committee selects the winning design. So you could be designing stamps or asked to design stamps wherever. The committee, because there's always 2 or 3 designers, the committee picks the winner. But in this case, it was Oscar who picked the winning submission. And what was bizarre about this was that the photographer came from Montreal. Canada Post rented a studio in Toronto, recorded the piano. Oscar comes in with his handler. He had already had a slight stroke by that time, so he needed assistance. But also the other designer was there that I was competing with. And I didn't even know the person at the time. So this was a very awkward moment for me. And as a designer, when I art direct photography, I never ever look over their shoulder or through the lens. They're a professional. They have to be creative. They have to do what they need to do. But this was a very awkward time because I'm there with the other designer that I'm competing against. So I waited for a moment where I could get the photographer off into a corner and to talk to him. And I said, look, you're going to do whatever you're going to do as far as portraiture work or whatever the other designer wants you to do and so on and so forth. But after we're through talking, you have to do a few things for me. And what I wanted him to do, because I knew Oscar Peterson, I knew he was a pianist. A lot of people don't know Oscar Peterson. They didn't know whether he was a cellist or a pianist. So for me, what was very important in conceiving this stamp was I needed to have an over-the-shoulder shot or a shot from above that shows his hands. But I wanted the hands in motion. I wanted the fingers to be blurred over a keyboard. So I didn't know what I was going to expect back, but I told him I specifically wanted some imagery taken from above to show the movement of his fingers. I was scared shitless because I left. I didn't stick around for the photo shoot. Canada Post was kind of appalled. I'm supposed to be their art director in photography, but I don't work that way. And I left it to the photographer, and I kept my fingers crossed, and then he sent me sheets and sheets of contact prints, and luckily I was able to find a few that had his hands blurred and in motion, and then manipulated them photographically in the computer. And what I like about this stamp is that all of the minimal information that's on the stamp itself, I pushed as far to the edges as I could. Even the Canada's up in the white area of the border. I didn't want anything to interfere with the classic look of this portrait that was taken through the open grand piano. Now, you'll see also on the side there, when we talk about color dots or color bars, which indicate the inks used and the number of colors used in the printing process. So I decided to create a keyboard to indicate the colors on the side. And you can't see it here, but The paper used in this case was indicated by the letter C. So I placed, I don't know, using keyboards, but somebody told me that that's the C key. You should place that C over the C key in the palette. Snowbirds. This is printed in 9 colors. Stamps appear in a pane of 16 plus a souvenir sheet displaying 2 stamps, and it was issued all at the same time. When we started this project, we knew we wanted to do something completely different with the subject matter, to create a look and feel that would reflect special characteristics of the snowbirds. The different was very evident in the final product. The stamps have a painterly appearance and a canvas-like quality that depicts the snowbirds in a way never seen before. We achieved this painterly palette by manipulating and layering multiple photographs in one stamp. We cut away the pilot and simulated the canopy. By combining images and graphics with subtle transparent effects, we got a first-hand view of the snowbirds in flight from the pilot's perspective. At first glance, the other stamp appears to have only 3 planes. If you look closely, however, you can see a number of ghosted planes representing the snowbird's 9-plane formation. A familiar sight on Canada Day and a hallmark of one of the world's most famous flying teams. You can't really see it there, but the stamp on the right has a background with very slight ghosted planes flying in the background. Now, that entire press sheet is shown on the wall in the back here. And what was interesting about this was that Canada Post, on certain occasions, retails autographed press sheets, like the one you see there. And my associate working with me at the time, I always give them credit on everything that I do. They've got a finger in it somehow. So he and I were asked to go to a lawyer's office in downtown Toronto where Canada Post had shipped 1,000 press sheets. There was a guard at the door, Canada Post representative in the room, and we sat there and autographed 1,000 sheets and numbered them. And then waited for the day of release. Well, when I went to purchase them from the Philatelic Center, they were sold out on the very first day. And I said, well, how can it be? Today's the first day of release for these. He said, oh, no, we advertised it to our collectors already months in advance, and they were already pre-sold. It took me a year and a half through Canada Post to beg and beg and beg to get a couple of press sheets. They could only find me one. And because I worked very closely with the marketing people in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, I sent that press sheet to Moose Jaw and had all the pilots sign them. So that's probably the only copy that exists with all of the pilots' signatures, except for one who perished in a training accident. So that's very special. Okay. Signed. So that's probably the only copy that exists with all of the pilots' signatures, except for one who perished in a training accident. So that's very special. Okay. Sam McLaughlin. The McLaughlin Motor Company was incorporated in 1907. The company was sold to General Motors, which celebrated its centennial in 2008. General Motors of Canada came into being with Sam as its president. Under Sam's leadership, GM became Canada's leading car exporter and a key force in one of the world's largest industries. We used the dry brush technique to create a more illustrative approach to the photograph. A duotone version of the image reminds us of the time period Sam revolutionized. The stamp also features the McLaughlin logo, and the original model. Okay, preserve the polar regions. This was an interesting stamp because it was a worldwide endeavor. Polar regions and glaciers respond very quickly to climate change. Their loss directly impacts human populations and ecosystems. Creatures that inhabit the Arctic and Antarctic polar regions, first to feel the dangerous effects of climate change, are featured on the stamps and souvenir sheet. By focusing on these animals, our goal was to highlight the dangers they will face if action is not taken to preserve their habitats. In the top half of the souvenir sheet, an Arctic fox explores a snowy Arctic landscape alongside the stamp featuring the polar bear. In the lower half, a group of penguins congregate in the Antarctic setting surrounding a stamp that features the Arctic tern. Now this bird serves as a link between the Arctic and Antarctic regions, since it migrates yearly between the North and South poles. So when I came across this bird, I thought this is a perfect symbolism to tie both the North Arctic and the South Antarctic together. The stamps were also canceled in Eureka and Nunavut, home of Canada's most northerly post office. And this stamp was issued around the world during that year by 30, not this particular stamp, but 39 countries participated in this particular project, including Estonia, to promote and protect the polar regions. So it was a lot of the philatelic communities around the world participated in issuing two stamp set for this particular thing. And we had to use a symbol that was designed by a Finnish designer, Saku. He was Saku a little bit. Okay, this was, I guess I should have added this in the non-winners. This was a stamp that was approved by the advisory committee last fall, which was to mark the 100th Grey Cup game, which happens this coming September in Toronto. Concept that we portrayed here is the Grey Cup, and obviously a football, otherwise people would know if it's hockey or lacrosse or what it is. So the symbolisms are minimal. Football, cup, and the 50-yard, 55-yard marker. And this is the only thing that distinguishes the Canadian football game from the U.S. game, which only has a 50-yard marker. Because Canada's field is 10 yards longer than the U.S. So to me, those three elements needed to be in the stamp. So the advisory committee approves this. We hear nothing back, nothing back, nothing back. Canada Post says, I'm sorry, but Canadian Football League rejected it. They didn't like the cup because it was on an angle. They wanted to see the entire cup on the stamp. So they asked us to rethink it. I looked at this and I said, this cup is a piece of shit. It's a teacup engraved on a giant blend oven. I'm not going to show this. So what I did, I made the cup even bigger. Because I tried showing the entire cup in this area. It didn't work. It looked ugly. So I made the cup even bigger, and I refused to put it upright because it's very boring. So I submitted it with a whole page rationale, and Canada, or the Canadian Football League says, you're out of here. So it got rejected. And to my knowledge, it's the first time that the advisory committee has ever been nixed by anybody. Canada Post, I was really pissed off because they normally stand up for the designer. So I don't know, maybe the Canadian Football League had a lot of money wrapped up in this. So you'll have to wait till September to see what the winning stamp is. Okay. Some stamps are winners. Now you get to see the losers. Okay. Okay. I had to throw this in here because I really like these stamps. This is the Baltic Sea Games from '92. I got a call from Tiit, who was actually living in Sweden, but he was part of the Estonian Post Advisory Committee. And this is right after independence. And he asked us to design 3 stamps for the first Baltic Sea Games, which I was very proud to acknowledge and accept. And we undertook this with no fee, only expenses, out-of-pocket expenses. And when I started to research into the stamps, because we didn't know where they were going to be printed, I think they were going to be printed in Germany. And when I looked at the stamps produced at that time, the perforations were always off. So the white borders that you see on the stamps were not even. So I said, no, this bothered me. So I decided that the backgrounds of these stamps, if they screw it up, the perforations are screwed up, the backgrounds have to be white, so if the perforation slips, it's not going to show. The other thing, I didn't know what kind of quality this printer could do. And because it was a sporting event, I decided to make them blurred and have motion to them, which meant that if they screwed up the printing and the registration, it would only enhance the stamp. So we submitted this. The Estonian Post acknowledged the 11th. Time passed and time passed. And then eventually the design was rejected based on political pressure. Oh, we can design our own and do it better. So jealousy and envy won the day. Now, Memo was so embarrassed and upset by this reversal decision that he resigned from the Estonian Post Advisory Committee. It was a very, very embarrassing moment for him, because we put a lot of time into this, and I personally like these stamps. These stamps also appeared in an article in an Estonian publication called Elu Kitty in 2006. And coincidentally, last week I got an email from a philatelist friend in Estonia who had just met with the new director of Estonian Post and their design director. When he showed them this article, they quoted, if they were making the decision regarding this series at the time, these stamps would have become reality. So again, jealousy. Okay, another loser. Our concepts are on the bottom. It's right here. The winning concepts are shown at the top. And this was dealing with Christmas lights. The concept 1, circle, square, triangle. How basic can you get? Graphically illustrated, lots of bright color, festive lights, etc. So it was unfortunately a losing thing. Firefighters, our concepts, and then the winning one at the top. Actually, I like this one too. Celebrations. This is a stamp they do every year, different themes and so on. This was a theme on noisemakers and party favors and so on. And I thought, the collection of variety of various elements to celebrate was pretty evident there. But, not too thrilled about the winning. But you win some, you lose some. Service and remembrance. And maybe on this one we showed too many elements. Too much symbolism. Whereas the top is. This was actually another one of my favorites, and this was the Black History Month in 2010. And Ferguson Jenkins and Carrie Best they were both received the Order of Canada medals. And I did this because, and I showed the bottom there, because the corner cutouts where their names appear, when you put them on a sheet, they become, there's a flip-flop going on there. I can't really explain it. You can see it in the bottom, middle, top two, where those white blocks kind of carry through each of the stamps as they sit side by side. But anyway, the winning stamps are shown at the top. Okay. You can tell that I love quotes. So these are just some symbols, logos, selections that I've done over the years. Some you'll recognize. I'll try to put in some Estonian relevance here. And a few of these we've won an award with. The Estonia 4, which is second row, second from the right. Masters you've all eaten at. ASDL you've all read and subscribed to, I hope. And there you go. Now, we get to see a couple of quick videos. Are you still with me, or you're not getting coffee? They're 5-6 minute videos. They're very short, and they'll give you a very good insight. And then after that, we'll take some questions. Okay, I think we're going to need evidence.
Nice to you.
Anyway, as a host, I found an interesting new set of requirements. You know, the host tonight, knee pads. But we borrowed. This is a borrowed laptop, and so it has a few quirks. And it's the latest and the greatest, but it doesn't react like something like we're used to. So in the meantime, do you have any questions for Tiit? Thomas.
Tiit, the cancellation stamp. Okay. The cancellation stamp, is the cancellation stamp something that you get to design each time as well? Or
Yes.
that's just...
The cancellation mark, which Canada Post uses to, when the first day covers with the stamps on them, they have that mark on them. So each of the stamps, you're able to do the cancellation marks. So we do the first day cover envelopes, the graphics for that. Cancellation mark, booklets if they're sticker stamps, anything else that goes with that stamp program.
So what was the cancellation stamp for the turn? It was a globe.
No, it was a circular mark, which basically conveyed a directional thing north to south.
Oh.
It was shown on there, but
Yeah, you couldn't quite tell exactly what it was, so.
Any other questions?
I know you all want coffee and fingers. Yes.
Tiit, you built your career with Canada Post, and I'm just curious, how did you get that first job with Canada Post?
I was a partner in a large design firm, very noted design firm in Canada, where we also designed stamps. So they knew of me already because I did a lot of interaction and work with Canada Post prior to before I went out on my own. So they knew of me. And Canada Post has been very selective. Funny little story, when I mentioned the amount of money that Canada Post pays for stamp design, you'll remember the sponsorship scandal. Andre Willette, Canada Post, a lot of monies were thrown at Quebec, Save Canada, et cetera, et cetera. Well, prior to that, we were getting $1,500 to design the stamp. And then all of a sudden, the well dried. All of the stamps that were being designed were coming out of Quebec. And when the sponsorship scandal hit, nobody touched anyone in Quebec. It all came back to the rest of Canada. All of a sudden, our fees doubled. Because once they'd given it, they couldn't take it back. So it was kind of interesting that all of a sudden, the sponsorship scandal paid off because we got But actually, a lot of people have wanted to design for Canada Post, and it's very interesting because at first I had a colleague, a very good designer, that used to come to my office to use my color printer. And because we're designing stamps at 4 or 5 times larger on the screen, brought it over, said, can you print this out? I said, sure. So I set the printer for 25%. He says, why are you doing this? I said, you need to see it at the actual stamp size. So I printed it because I knew what was going to happen. It looked fine at 4 times the size. When I printed it out, he said, oh my God. He said, there's way too much information on here. So you have to see it in context to your thumb size. So again, less is more. Even though the printing, the detail is there, you only have a split second before you lick that little piece of paper and put it onto a stamp, and that has to leave an impact with you. So designing stamps is much, much more difficult than designing a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper format. And the beauty of working in signage, which is large scale and thumb size scale, is that I get that flexibility of large to miniature to work in. And it's an interesting challenge, but they're 2 totally different aspects of design.
You talked about the sheet that you have where you have all the pilot's signatures on it.
Yes, on the wall.
That is the only one in the world. How much do you think it's worth?
Oh, I don't know, but I don't sell that. Once I die, that's going to go to my assistant that did a lot of the technical work on it because I could only get one, so he's going to inherit that.
It's the worth. It's priceless. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Okay, where's all our technical people?
It seems to me that what you're doing is you're printing currency in a way. Do you work together with the Canadian Mint at all? Are there any systems in place where you have the same kind of structures in place?
Well, that's very interesting you asked. I brought up this snowbird set in the back room, and I didn't want to leave it out because somebody could have walked off with a $5 silver coin. But Canada Post and the Mint did a joint project together for the snowbird.
Sorry.
It's in a metal case. It has a $5 silver coin in it, and then it's a numbered set, and it's got the souvenir sheet embedded in. It's in this aluminum case. So sometimes we work together, but Canada Post works very independently with, but usually stamps and coins are two totally different things.
Our technical assistant.
Once it was determined that land vehicles were the subject matter for the series of stamps, we had to research and assign a design style to it. We picked a style that was sort of a middle period from the turn of the century through the 50s, and that would be sort of an Art Deco style. And we felt that under the conditions, if the side view would create a unified look, it would give a very formal center axis type of a style. The typography supporting it is indicative of the period. And grouping them always in 6, because there was 6 vehicles on a sheet, souvenir sheet, spanning 4 years.
The amount of detail that Canada Post and the collectors have demanded over the evolution of the stamp series is seen here with the cockshut tractor, where all the nuts and bolts, all the framing, all the body work, right down to all the electrical, all the hex nuts, and all the body molding, and even the number of coils that are used on any of the springs or any of the sprockets or anything within the engine have to be there, are expected to be there just based on the amount of necessary accuracy that these illustrations have to take on.
You have an extensive amount of information that's contained in a very small miniaturized area, and the amount of effort and detail that has to be put in, and especially currently with the technologies that we have at our disposal, that detail and awareness to detail and accuracy is just incredible. It's sometimes mind-boggling for a lot of people that don't understand the whole stamp process.
The amount of detail shown here goes as far as including shadow detail, highlight detail, the expanse of colors that are used, and even right down to the imprints from the water steam engine company that appears on the boiler. In the original archival information that we were provided, the flywheel that appears in orange here was originally drawn and colored in green to match the body. When we found out later on that it was indeed orange, it was a matter of receiving from the archival people receiving a orange paint chip, matching the paint chip in the computer as accurately as we could, incorporating darker and lighter shades of that color for highlight and for shadow, and then incorporating it into the final illustration.
For us, every stamp project has been a wonderful learning experience, and I think the thrill of that is worth all of the time and effort that we put into them.
I feel this work has allowed me my kind of 15 minutes of fame within Canadian history, because it's a one-of-a-kind piece that recognizes the accomplishments of many, many people within the Canadian vehicle manufacturing industry. And I'm proud to be able to do this work and show my wares to promote them and promote their accomplishments.
5 more minutes.
the stamp production process begins. Following the painstaking research, intricate design work, and detailed artwork necessary to create stamp images, a number of key stages must take place in order to print the final stamps. Number 1, preparation of color separation films and one-on provings. 2, wet trap proving. And 3, printing and finishing. Before these production stages could begin, artwork for the historic land vehicle stamp designs was delivered to the film house in the form of electronic files on a computer disc or cartridge. At the film house, important consultations were held between the designer, a representative of Canada Post, and a film technician to analyze exactly how the artwork should appear on the finished stamp. And details such as file conversion, color balance, the lettering style or fonts, printing techniques, and special image manipulation were discussed. It is at the film house that stage 1, preparation of color separation films, and one-on provings begins. First, the pre-flight stage takes place. It is called pre-flight because, like a pilot preparing to fly, the film house checks or proves that all the controls and artwork components specified by the designer are in place and that the transfer to the film house computer systems is a smooth one. The artwork disc is then scanned to transfer the design into the film house computer system so that the images can be electronically manipulated and pre-pressed digital proofs can be prepared. Once adjustments have been made to such things as color, image density, and layout, the film is created, plotted, and processed. The resulting film looks very similar to the negatives returned to you when you have film from your camera processed. The image on the film is then transferred to metal plates mounted on the printing press, and the images are reproduced on paper to allow one-on proving to begin. One-on proving involves looking at proofs of a single printed image on paper and checking that the image produced is of high quality, that colors that make up the image are balanced and of consistent densities, and that any dust spots and broken letters have been cleaned up. One-on proving must be done before millions of duplicates of an image can be printed as stamps. Once Canada Post is satisfied that the film used to make the plates for printing exactly replicates the original artwork, the film is shipped to the Canadian Banknote Company in Ottawa, where the stamps will be printed. The next 2 stages of stamp production take place at Canadian Banknote, the same place where some of Canada's money is printed. Once again, plates are made from the film provided by the film house. Color test bars are added along the margins. The final single image is then replicated as multiple images in panes of 25. As many as 8 of these panes will then make up a complete press sheet of 200 stamps. The plates are then mounted on the printing press, and the press is inked up so that wet trap proofs can be produced. The next stage, wet trap proving, simulates an actual production situation and allows Canada Post to see how the wet color inks are printing in layers on top of one another. The Canadian Banknote Press has the ability to print on paper 7 ink colors in succession in the order determined to best reproduce the desired image. Once again, careful inspections make sure the image reproduced is high quality, that the color is balanced, that the different colors in the images are overlapping exactly or in register, and that the images are being printed correctly. Many sample or trial pulls are taken from the press for proving by the designer, the Canada Post representative, and the printer. Finally, when everything is perfect, final approval to print is given by the Canada Post representative. The third and final stage of production, stamp printing and finishing, now begins. First, special stamp paper kept under lock and key at Canadian Banknote must be loaded in the press feeder. Then the selected ink colors must be poured into large ink fountains in the printing press. Finally, the sheets of stamps are printed and delivered to the finishing area at Canadian Banknote. Here the sheets are perforated, inspected, and packaged. Preparation of stamps for philatelic products and first day cover envelopes also takes place at this stage. Usually, for a standard commemorative issue, 15 million stamps are printed. For the 1996 Historic Land Vehicle Series, 1 million panes of 25 different vehicle stamps and 800,000 souvenir sheets of 6 stamps were issued. This now completes your glimpse of the stamp production process. As you can see, there is a great deal of research, creativity, and technology behind these concentrated images that remind us of our history and culture. The national symbol that is the Canadian stamp.
What's interesting is that each sheet of paper is numbered, sequentially numbered. And there's no sheet of paper that ends up in the bin. Every sheet is accounted for. Every sheet that's put through the press at the wet proofing stage and at the production run, all the numbers are in sequence, all the sheets are accounted for. They're signed for multiple times, whoever's handling them, etc. So it's like money. There's nothing that ends up in the waste bin. Any other questions? I think you're all, oh, one question. Yes.
Sorry.
I guess.
It's just possibly a comment more than a question, and that instead of value is found in stamps oftentimes in imperfection rather than in perfection.
Yes.
Sorry, that was imperfection versus imperfection. And is there, I mean, are there any backroom shenanigans, or like, is there any kind of a war story or an interesting story you might have that where people have deliberately put errors into the printing to pump up value or to pump up interest in philately?
Actually, Canada Post is really very much against this kind of thing because this is a manipulation. And philatelists go crazy if they ever hear of stories like that. The only time that this happened that I know of with the regiment stamps, it was a technical problem because nobody foresaw that we were going to lay so much ink on that sheet of paper, and then when the metal dye hit the black, corner to corner, it didn't register. So that's why Canada Post, they wouldn't allow that stuff to even get out onto the market. They destroyed most of that print run because they don't want the speculation to occur in the philatelic community. They're totally against any kind of shenanigans that take place. If there's any, I mean, there's always bound to be something suspect or something that happens that gets onto a particular stamp or something has an imperfection in the perforation, or the printer guys have to go through. They're constantly looking at as the press is running, and they're pulling out sheets to make sure that the registration is there, that there's no imperfections, there's no specks of dust or dirt. They pull those sheets aside. They don't get into the philatelic at all, but those sheets are kept on the side. They're all numbered, they're all accounted for. So they're very careful about any shenanigans. Yes?
Have you made this presentation in front of other groups?
I've talked with stamp clubs and so on, but not this particular presentation. No.
I find it highly unique and very valuable and educational.
Well, it's also, we had I apologize for the technical difficulties, but we survived. Actually, the beauty of working on stamps is that there's so many wonderful little stories, and I'll give you a couple of little examples. Jan liked the Labatt's truck. So, actually, this truck was being restored by two brothers in Milton Center. And when we did this, we actually went out there and took photographs of this thing. But when Canada Post sent this thing around to authenticate it, we had drawn a mirror they had put on this truck because this truck is still used for promotional purposes because they spent 8 or 10 years of their life restoring this thing to its original. To get it roadworthy, they had to use the big rear view mirrors that trucks use these days on this vehicle. Well, when this was sent around to be authenticated by experts, they said, no, this mirror is the wrong mirror. It had to be the tiny little mirrors, which were used during that era. So we had to change that. So Canada Post is very, very careful to authenticate, especially when you're into so much detail, the authenticity of various elements. And another funny little story, the Skyliner bus, we couldn't find any kind of information on that particular bus because it had the curved roof with glass and so on. So Canada Post searched across the country to find anybody that had any, we saw pictures of it and so on, but couldn't get any actual access to a real vehicle or parts of it. So they contacted a retired bus driver. He was living in Calgary. And they asked him, you know, where can we get some more information on this particular Skyliner bus? And he said, I know. It was in the desert in Arizona. The desert where they keep, you know, the old airplanes, because it's dry there. They have trains, they have airplanes, they have large vehicles and so on. He says, I know there's one there. And he says, what do you need? Well, we needed to get some photographs of this. Oh, I'm happy to do this. Well, Canada Post, they were going to commission him to do this. He says, no, listen, I'm bored, I'm retired, I'm a bus driver my whole life. I'll just go down there and tell me what you need and I'll get it done. So they paid for his gas. He drove from Calgary down to Arizona. We told him how to photograph this rusted hulk of a bus. We told him to take a Swiss Army knife along because we wanted to take paint chips off of that. It was a rusted hulk sitting in the middle of a desert, and we photographed each section flat from the side of this particular vehicle, sent us the photographs, and he was so happy that he could drive from Calgary to Arizona to take these pictures for us. So there's love and story.
Wayne?
How much does Canada Post pay per stamp? I mean, from the initial concept stage to a number of artists proposing to the various stages it goes through to the end product.
How much they spend?
How much per stamp? Is there an average?
Oh, I have no idea. All I know is what they pay me, which is probably, for my time I put into it, I make about $5 an hour. But, because some of these illustrations, for example, would take 30, 40 hours to do. Now, Canada Post has always been very generous, but when they give you a $1,500 or $3,000 for a concept, which you might take a month to do, I mean, you figure it out for hours. So it's motherhood and apple pie. If you do this for the love of it, like I said, to me, design is a way of life. It's passion. It's, you know, I'm not rich. I don't mean. So you don't make a lot of money on it. But if you think about the millions of stamps they sell for, what is it these days, $1 or something per stamp, and they print millions, it covers the cost of their production. Now, the production these days is, instead of having 4-color or 5-color presses and having to run sheets through twice to get a 9-color print job, they've got 10-color presses, so they can put that sheet of paper through once and get all 9 colors in one pass. So there's technologies there that have been brought into play that drives the unit cost down. Now, your labor costs are still another factor, and that's why one of the security printers opened a plant in Calgary, because the union costs in Ottawa were getting to the point where they couldn't afford it anymore. And I tell you, farmers printing in Calgary, first class. First class. And you know what? They have a passion for this. And they love what they do up there too. So it's if you're working with a pressman and he's half asleep because you're looking at little details, I tell you, the guys in Calgary, boy, they're right there. They'll do anything for you. They'll change the red, bump it up, etc., etc., to make that stamp really fly off the piece of paper.
Any other questions?
Coffee?
Not that quickly.
Oh, I have. Yes. I have a request. I have birthday covers here, signed, and
Signed by yourself.
by myself. And I'm offering these to anyone that wants to buy them for $10 a piece as a donation to VEMU. So we're going to.
Is that a great idea or what?
The money man and to look after them.
Now, I'm going to thank Tiit, but then I have a little, we have to have some advertising. This is a free event, right? So we have some advertising after. But I think first of all, we want to thank Tiit for a very informative seminar this evening, presentation on what is, I would argue, certainly one of Canada's most famous stamp designers. So let's give a big round of applause.
My technical assistants too.
I think you'll all agree that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the evening, I didn't realize there were this many stamp enthusiasts, that we had that many. But I'm sure you had it was a very informative and a very interesting discussion, Tiit. So thanks again very much. We'll go and have some oysters and beer pretty soon.
Thank you for coming. And if over coffee you want to ask me more questions or you want to go home because you're tired of lick and stick stories.
I'm not going to take very long, but I have a few announcements. If you like tonight's